Hey, welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Hope everyone's doing well. Terrific guest tonight. We have Rick Noriega, who some of you may know. Probably most of you know if you do any voting. Rick has been a longtime buddy of mine, and we first met, I guess, Rick, when you were in the House.
Right.
And we did some of the human trafficking legislation together.
Sure did.
Then Rick ran for Senate against John Cornyn. Rick also was a senior officer in Afghanistan in the Army, and so he's just done a lot of great things. And now he's at AVANCE, having been the CEO there for 5 years. And so, Rick, welcome to our studio today.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for having me. And it's great to be among a bunch of Cougars. And so, as an alumni of University of Houston, my undergraduate degree, it's always great to be around a lot of young, fresh minds. It's inspiring for me. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So these are a lot of students who are really interested in the nonprofit world. They're getting their master's in nonprofit. And so when we talk about leadership and nonprofits, if you were to write, the Rick Noriega guide on leadership, and in general leadership, what would some of the chapters look like, Rick?
Well, I think that, first, I think it's your approach of, first, what is leadership? Because you ask, all these people here that are in the audience, and you ask 10 people, you'll get 15 answers. Mm-hmm. So from the lens of where they view leadership. And I think that, you've got some textbook definitions, but I've always viewed it as a way of inspiring and bringing folks along to share your vision and have buy-in. Mm-hmm. and to be able to inspire and collaboratively bring folks to an end state of success or mission. And I think the best, you had mentioned my time in the House. I mean, for me, the best example has always been having authored the Texas Dream Act in 2001 that Governor Perry signed. At that time, I think somewhere in the ballpark of 142 to 3 were the votes on the House side. Today would be absolutely,
different.
It would
it wouldn't pass this.
It wouldn't happen. But back to your question on the tenets of leadership, I think that, we've always said in the military, to be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. Mm-hmm. So, you never ask colleagues or superiors or subordinates to do things that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. Mm-hmm. And folks have to, have an appreciation for your sincerity and your, involvement of what you're doing collectively, so that they can believe in in what you're trying to achieve. In addition, I think that, another chapter has to be in whatever arena that you're working, specifically in nonprofits, you want to be technically and tactically proficient. In other words, you really need to know something. You need to know your craft. People won't, there's a lot of folks out there that have done a lot of good work for a long time, and you can't come in there and wolf them. You really have to, have some good base of knowledge base of the area that you're working in. And I will tell you, as a person that has not specifically worked in the area of two-generation parental engagement and early childhood education, there are people that are, they have forgotten more than I will ever know in the area of early childhood education. Mm-hmm. But, I have a responsibility, and like tomorrow night, I'm taking our curriculum, I'm as the president CEO, am going through our curriculum class with other families.
Are you really?
And so it's imperative that you have that knowledge base of what it is you're trying to do. And then I think that as well as at times you have to be able to be willing to be decisive and make difficult decisions, and be able to explain why. And I think those are some of the things I would say immediately I would look to. Now, I will share with you too, Bob. People that will say someone's a leader, I've always looked at it from more of a macro aspect, that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. And in some instances, history will really determine whether you were a leader or not. Not that you were just in a job and you had subordinates, and therefore you're a leader. Well, not necessarily. You were in a position of authority, perhaps, but that does not therefore come, they may respect the position, doesn't mean they necessarily respect the person who's in that position. And so you have to earn that, then I think, to really be considered perhaps a leader in that position. In addition, even if you're on a team and you're a subordinate, doesn't mean you can't exercise leadership to move the group.
Right.
There are ways of doing it formally, informally, verbally, non-verbally, to make interventions to move the group toward a common goal. So I mean, those are just some real quick thoughts.
Yeah. Where did you come from, Rick? I mean, where did you grow up? I mean, tell us a little bit about that background.
Well, I've got DNA running through my bones. My dad grew up just down the street from here in the 2nd Ward. Really? In Houston, and my mother as well was from the Magnolia Park and Smith Addition area. So grew up here in Houston in the Gulf Gate area. Yeah. And have always been a Houston homeboy. Wow. And my great grandmother. Well, here's a real quick. The best way to put it is. This lady was moved to, or inspired to, bring her son to Houston, Texas in around the 1916, 1920 time frame, and settled in the 2nd Ward. Her son passes away, and then she's left raising her 2 grandchildren. Now, this story isn't unique. It's much of the stories we hear today.
Did she come from Mexico?
She came from San Luis Potosi, Mexico, crossed in Eagle Pass, Texas, and arrived here in the 2nd Ward. And fast forward, now I have the privilege to sit here with you.
Yeah, I know.
And share some stories with friends and students.
It's amazing. One of the very interesting things that I find about you two, Rick, is that when West Wing was sort of the big show on TV, as they rounded out, they did this whole thing about a guy named Santos from Houston, and it was based upon you.
And he was actually, it sounded as though he was from Denver. Actually, I think they had him as a character from Denver Harbor, right down Interstate 10.
But he lived in a nice house.
He did.
He I noticed that.
Yeah, but it was interesting. He played a great role in that.
And he ran for president and won. Did you ever think back in the day that maybe that could happen with you?
I didn't. I think that what was inspiring to me was that I was the middle of 3 children. And so my older brother, who's 5 years older, grew up in the 60s, and I guess in those days, in the early 60s, was probably beat down a little bit, And then my younger sister, she was the princesa. So, and so then I wound up for the family kind of fulfilling that kind of role as the warrior of the family and trying to take on things for the whole family, even for my parents that maybe had rough experiences over time. And but no, I think that just trying to get things done, do the best I could at what I was attempting, and then I think too, I went to Mount Carmel High School, and then I think that was instilled in me a spirit of always being to always stand up against injustice. Yeah. And the issues of injustice that always, we have to be vigilant about it all the time. And I think those kinds of values that were instilled in me has just kept me always fighting and trying to do the right thing.
Your last sort of political thing that you did is you ran for the U.S. Senate against Senator Cornyn. I don't know if you remember, my daughter worked as an intern on your campaign, working with Carlos for a whole year. And when you got into that, obviously you always get in it to win, but it's an uphill battle in Texas for a Democrat today to win.
And taking on an incumbent U.S. Senator. I think that the percentage, when all of you run for the U.S. Senate, if you're taking on an incumbent and you're not, it's not an open seat, you have probably less than a 10% chance of overcoming an incumbent unless they make a significant gaffe or mistake of some kind. But it is a very tough proposition.
How was that for you? I mean, was it?
It was very difficult.
and
I mean, it was a strain on the family.
Yeah.
I mean, it was about a year and a half almost, Bob, that we were involved in that endeavor.
Traveling all over the States.
Traveling all over. You wake up and you're wondering, okay, where am I?
Yeah.
You know, it's a strain on your family, your finances, in every respect. So it was a very difficult proposition. But at the same time, I would tell you, you know, the great-grandson of Ignacio Noriega that came from San Luis Potosí, to say that, you know, I was a Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate from the great state of Texas. And I think, Bob, you go back or ask your daughter or someone, I think we may still be perhaps the highest in that particular category vote getter to date. So we'll get to see as this election cycle as time goes on, but that's still, I think, kind of the threshold of a Democratic vote.
And the hope is,
getter.
you know, maybe in 10 or 12 years that there'll be someone who gets more votes than you in the Democratic.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the proposition for us in 2008, and probably was a difficult, I always kid about it, difficult hurdle for some people to adjust to, is that it was on a ticket with the presidential candidate on the other side that was Arizona
McCain.
Senator, it was McCain and Cornyn against the other guys, which was Obama Noriega. So I think that, and people probably is like one of the movies say, "Well, that's an easy one. We're going to go with these names that we can pronounce."
But the day will come when the demographics, and the day is very close, when the demographics are stuff that the Obama Noriega campaign would be the one that wins.
Well, and I think there are a lot of people that are listening in today that are going to benefit from those fights, because you and I both as well stand on a whole lot of other people's shoulders.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of our both legacy and duty is to ensure that those that are listening today, to give them the opportunity to, you know, surpass whatever we may have imagined.
How was it for you as a leader who'd done so much in the State House, so beloved by so many, and then to go to this very hard campaign, to know that it's uphill, but then to lose? I mean, how do you feel at the end of that campaign? Is it devastating? Is it a relief, or is it all of those things?
I think it's all those things.
Yeah.
I would tell you that to this day, I know that, you know, both our family has suffered greatly as a result of that, and in a lot of ways, you know, emotionally, spiritually, financially. At the same time, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Relieved, I mean, in fact, I was listening to one of the current candidates running for a position, and she knew exactly how many days till the election. And it was difficult, especially on election night, because not really for yourself, but for your daughter.
Yeah.
And for the entire team that had invested so much, you know, blood, sweat, and tears. And I'll never forget, probably the most difficult thing I had to do that night was I was asked, well, someone had already told me and was whispering in my ears, okay, hey, it doesn't look like it's going to turn out the way we wanted it to turn out. And almost simultaneously, I was asked to do a news interview outside, I think with Univision or someone, and I was having to, you know, keep a chin up, and we're still at the same time that I knew that we were in a downward spiral and have to do this, you know, this particular thing of saying, well, you know, all the boxes aren't in yet. We'll see what's going to happen, and we're hopeful, and everybody's worked hard, and those kinds of things. But then to walk back into this room where we had our, you know, immediate tight circle, and everybody is super emotional, you know, told them, you know, how much I appreciated them, how much I loved them, and at the same time, you do feel like the weight is off your shoulders. It's been a tremendous amount of strain and pressure. The beautiful aspect of it is, in a big state like Texas, Ann Richards used to say she didn't know how big Texas was until she had to campaign it. And absolutely true. And it's the most touching experiences you can imagine. When people open up their homes to you and allow you to stay in their homes, and they, what little they may have, they offer to you. or to have someone in West Texas, a senior citizen lady, follow you around a couple of campaign stops, and she says, "Here, Mr. Noriega, here's $30. I had to wait till my Social Security check came in before I wanted to tell you that we're supporting you." And so you feel an enormous amount of responsibility to folks like that. And so it is both, it's tough. At the same time, as I mentioned, I wouldn't change it for the world for that experience. It was a very calculated decision. I was getting ready to turn 50 years old. I could retire from the State House. I knew that my shelf life in terms of having had some wins or having a high bar in terms of name identification, things like that, having worked the George R. Brown Convention Center as the incident commander during Katrina, having just returned from Afghanistan, having passed the Texas DREAM Act, having, or rather, enjoying a lot of public goodwill at that time.
You had a lot going for you.
Had a lot going, and if not now, when? And if not me, who? And so I knew that it was a very high stakes and a less than 50% chance of probability, but you never know. You know, I love the Teddy Roosevelt quote about the person in the ring, and so no regrets.
Was one of the decisions, then I want to get back to leisure, was one of the decisions, do I wait out and run for mayor, or was it always you wanted to do sort of statewide?
I think that in terms of things like mayor, that position, which is an executive position, it's a fixer kind of position. It's always been intriguing. And I think that it was just an opportunity that I had kind of analyzed, having witnessed a guy by the name of Victor Morales in 1996 that rode around in a white pickup truck, who was able to win the Democratic primary. What I did know in terms of the demographics, if you had a legitimate Latino candidate on a statewide ballot in the Democratic primary, unless you messed it up, you were more than likely going to be the nominee. So analyzing that, and I figured that I had a pretty good shot of winning the Democratic nominee. It was a chance.
You're now at AVANCE.
AVANCE.
How is that for you, going from a sort of a public servant to now running a nonprofit? Still a public servant, but in a very different way. What was that transition like?
It was an interesting transition. The nonprofit arena is unique, and at the same time, I've always been, as an infantry officer, an operator, wanting to fix things and so forth. So here was an opportunity. The organization itself, AVANCE, has a very critical mission, which is parental engagement, parent education, and early childhood development, 0 to 3. And if you look at this about, okay, where's the butterfly effect about how we change the world? What's the decisive point? To me, that's where it is. Little did I know so much. I mean, all the things that we deal with in the nonprofit world that are important are oftentimes the collateral effect and downstream effects of us not giving the parents the tools to know how to help their children in the first 36 months when their brain is developing, when they're physically developing, emotionally, socially developing, and which is the empirical data shows it is the most decisive point of where you make a difference, where you break the cycle of poverty, where you change a kid's ability to really meet their full potential, which is demonstrated then by their pre-K assessment, kindergarten assessment, third grade reading ability. So to me, it's an exciting mission. I mean, I get really, and I, want to shake people and say, y'all, we get all excited about, and this isn't to pick on any other worthy efforts, but oftentimes in around Christmas time, you'll see countless ads on homeless pets, which is important. And they show these very
touching
commercials and very
Sarah
sad with the
Payne,
and the weeping-eyed dog and all this other kind of stuff. Important. However, in May of this year, across the state of Texas, graduating classes graduated probably half of the number of students that started 4 years prior.
Right.
And yet we have no outrage about that. And they're clicking to give $5 to the emaciated pet.
Right.
And so I think and so to me, you know, sometimes I think our priorities are a little bit, or we become so numb to the status quo of what's happening to our kids that we just don't, we aren't as outraged as we should be.
I visited a county commissioner when I took over at Children at Risk, and he said, Bob, this is Steve Raddick, he said, Bob, have you ever considered, you know, taking on pets as well? And I thought, well, this guy's crazy. And I said, no, we're about children. He goes, you know, when I do a pet park, a dog park, I get far more positive response than when I do anything for children.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, people do get more interested in pet things than children, and we should, as a society, it's like we're leaving children behind many times.
Well, and to me, Bob, I had the opportunity at the Aspen Institute last week to talk like this very candidly. And so when I went to the U.S. Army War College in 2011, what you learn in that environment is that great nations project their power, their will, in three specific domains. It's, their economics, their economic ability, power. Obviously, their military power, which the economics buys the beans and the bullets, and then your diplomatic power, which the first two items really help you have more leverage at the table, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how you project power as a nation. And to feed those, you have to realize what your greatest asset and resource is as a nation. And for us, and what we still haven't wrapped our arms around, it's our people. It's our children. It's our intellectual capability. That, in the long run, a lot of the natural resources are going to go away, but your folks is what is your richest asset, and then in policy, how you invest in that to maintain your edge as a great nation is what I think is critical. So, but I got away from your question a little bit, but I mean, there is so that I'm kind of talking about the strategic aspect of our mission and where we focus our attention to change the world, the butterfly effect.
Yep.
But then there's also at the operational level, meaning how you serve more families and children, how you do the work of your business so that you're credible, you keep the lights on, you're paying your bills, you're doing all those operational things to be legitimate, and you're not living as a nonprofit from hand to mouth. And then too, at what I call the tactical level, where the rubber meets the road, where we're actually administering our curriculum to parents and children,
right.
What that product looks like and how good that product is, that curriculum, is another facet of the organization. Now, right now, I focus more as the president and CEO, obviously, at that strategic level, to try to work with organizations like yours, Children at Risk, and so forth, to help shape national policies so that we take care of our kids and families.
Yeah.
And then at the operational level, about how we get better so that we're serving more families and children and expanding. And what I learned in this environment as a culture, and I think this is important for people either working in nonprofit or considering working in nonprofit. To me, not having worked exclusively in nonprofit, I found it kind of interesting how culturally parochial it is in many ways. And what I mean by that is I got mines, and so they don't tend to be as collaborative as I've got my one solution, my one niche to save this piece of the world, and this is my lane, and there are only so many cookies on the table, and I better get mine or otherwise. And I think that the culture of the nonprofits and what I'm really coming to realize a lot more and about how to get a lot more done is the collaboration with others. And it allows you to realize efficiencies, it allows you to leverage resources, and then in the long run, it helps you meet your mission because you're doing your job better and you're reaching more families and children. And so I found that as a real interesting introduction to the nonprofit world about how parochial sometimes the culture can be.
Let me get to some of the
Sure,
students'
sure.
questions.
Please.
From our advanced class, Samantha wanted to know, how often does AVANCE do a strategic plan, and which stakeholders do you guys consult with as you do that strategic plan?
We're right in the, well, we just went through a one-year process in terms of strategic planning. And part of the strategic plan was to discuss, well, how often are we going to do this? And yeah, and so we have, and so what we have determined is on a every other year basis. Okay, this is where we're headed. Let's test it out. Let's get back the results. Let's assess those results. Let's, bring in the recommendations. Let's, figure out which of those recommendations now we're going to employ, and you go back through that cycle, right? So, and then what we do for resourcing that, we're very fortunate. We have a couple of donors, of investors that have specifically helped us with that process.
Yeah. Do you guys dream really big when you do your strategic planning, or is it very tactical?
It is, I try to make sure that it is more at the operational and strategic level. And then, and not, I don't want my board of directors and folks getting into the weeds of wanting to know how many reams of paper we bought.
Right.
That's not what we have them there for, that kind of decision making. A higher order.
So your board is very involved in
Our board
plan.
has been involved in the strategic plan. We're going on a retreat this next spring to revisit the topic. Our staff, we do a summer annual employee retreat, and I have all of our national teams specifically with the idea of our strategic planning aligned with our strategic priorities as an organization, and so that everything kind of nests together, so that then we can measure outcomes, we can measure success, and grade ourselves.
Monica wants to know, are you in charge of the strategic plan, or do you put a board member in charge, or who do you put in charge of sort of getting the whole thing going?
Well, that's a good question, Monica, and I have I try to do that as a third party, so that I'm not swaying
Absolutely.
everybody's input and recommendations. And so, fortunately, we have an organization that's called New Profit, out of an investor out of Boston. They are a nonprofit that specifically has a portfolio of nonprofits that they act as, I guess you'd kind of say like a corporate McKinsey group.
So they're like a consultant to
They are
help
like
you
a
get
consultant,
through the
and
plan.
they help us in a lot of different ways for the purposes of scaling and whatnot. They vet organizations in a very,
Do they charge you or not?
They do not. Actually, what was happening is we're selected.
Yeah.
And they have a host of an umbrella of investors that have invested in them to vet nonprofits. They have chosen what social spaces that they want to invest in for the purposes of changing those areas.
Yeah.
Be it juvenile justice, be it early childhood education, etc. And so New Profit has other partners like Monitor Deloitte, which is an investor with us, and the Bezos Family Foundation, Jeff Bezos,
yeah,
Amazon.com
yeah.
and whatnot. And so they, as an outside entity, has invested in us, and then they have really helped lead us through these processes, and it allows me to kind of step back, put my 2 cents in, but then once we have all come to some accord on which way we're going, why, and how we're going to measure success, then it's my job to resource that effort and to to keep us focused on trying to achieve those goals.
Marta noticed that in your current strategic plan, your number one priority was to strengthen functional partnerships. How do you guys measure strengthening functional partnerships?
Well, what we've done, we've measured those in onesies and twosies. I mean, actually counting how many national strategic partners we have, we are now affiliated with that are value-added propositions to the organization. As an example, the Aspen Institute, which now has an enormous effort. It's called Ascend. That is become now the knowledge base for 2-generation interventions into families, meaning an adult child. And so we've become a partner of theirs to be able to share knowledge and along with other organizations, and in turn we benefit from this network of like organizations that serve parents and children. We are members of America Forward, which that is, again, a partnership network of people that are working in the early childhood space that you're aware of.
Yep.
Ready Nation. Ready Nation as well is a national collaborative of folks working in the area of early childhood education. We benefit from a lot of the research they do and things of that nature.
There's good partners out there.
So we have a lot of great partners, and so how we measure it is that 2 years ago we became at the table of the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, which is comprised of 32 organizations, from your LULACs to your National Council of La Raza to MALDEF, et cetera. And so we are the only organization within this National Hispanic Advocacy Consortium that is an early childhood voice at the table. So then it allows us to help shape their agenda and their approach to early childhood education. And so we then are the ones that are that voice. So, and so we measure it by not just how many affiliated organizations that we are with, but actually also what they do and how we influence what they do. Just last night I was in Dallas, Texas with a consortium that we're members of that's called Text Protects. That is about child abuse, right?
Absolutely.
And so we were part of the team that went to the legislature last session and got an additional $8 million for home visitation programs to try to curb, child abuse. And so, and they have very specific metrics and things that they have done to help curb child abuse through home visitation programs, which we happen to be one of them. So we measure both with, the quality and the number of national, those collaboratives that we're members of, in addition, what kind of work they do in our social space.
Nicole Amaya, who's a veteran, wants to know, as a veteran yourself, do you bring some of the strategic planning that you did as an officer? Does some of that contribute to the strategic planning that goes on at AVANCE?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As an infantry officer, in fact, I use the terminology and the framework language all the time within our organization. In addition to not having been in nonprofit work a lot, being able to cut out the nonsense. Oftentimes, say, wait, that just doesn't make sense, and we've got it, and so oftentimes when we have very well-intended folks in social nonprofit type organizations, they tend to sometimes make emotional decisions versus a little bit more objective analytical decisions, which can can sometimes be bad decision making. So without question, I mean, I bring that background organizationally to our organization.
Harry wanted to know benchmarks. So at Children at Risk, some of our benchmarks as we do strategic planning, because we're about awareness, we do media hits. We do pieces of legislation passed. We do money raised. What are a couple of the benchmarks that you guys have? Obviously, money raised is always one, right?
Yeah, and you know, we look at social impact. We have 3 strategic priorities that we have for this year that deal with increasing our national awareness, strategic impact, and strengthening the organization internally. And so, you know, it's kind of that KISS principle, keep it simple.
Yep.
And then each department, whether you're a communications department, HR, IT, development, each of those departments then come up with their strategic priorities or goals that feed into those 3. Communications is a good example. This year we are going to increase our Twitter followers by X.
Right.
And so, okay, that feeds into strategic priority number 2.1, and then within the communications department, the person who's actually in charge of the Twitter account, then on her job description or his job description, all of those things nest up and feed into, synchronize with what our 3 strategic priorities are. And that it holds true whether you're in HR, so that, I mean, we're all one team, and everybody recognizes we're working toward the 3 same strategic priorities. And so when you get down into the weeds of the organization, HR is a good one. We're going to reduce the number of, and some things you don't think about, we're going to reduce the number of workers' compensation claims based on having a better safety environment. Y'all may not think about this much, but there are things that occur when a parent educator or someone who's working with toddlers and children are walking backwards while they're leading a group of kids in line. The stumbles and the fall, there's just a whole host of things that occur all the time. And so that everybody in the organization is a safety officer, and to reduce our workers' compensation claim is an example of, in the HR environment, how it's important to the organization, to the livelihood of the organization. So, and I can go through multiple examples through all the different departments about what they do, and money raised. I mean, that's always a pretty easy metric, right?
Yeah.
And but you know, you don't set yourself up for failure as well. You understand what's achievable and what's doable and what's you know, just a pipe dream.
Yeah. So in our next 10 to 15 minutes, I have about maybe 60 tweets that have just come in. And so let's do some quick answers.
Great.
Esmeralda Jimenez wants to know, is AVANCE going to expand to other cities from where it is now?
AVANCE, we are in cities throughout the state of Texas. We also are operating in 3 counties in Northern California, Southern New Mexico, Michigan, and then we have partners in New York and New Jersey who administer our curriculum. Thank you, Esmeralda, for that question. And part of our metrics in terms of scaling, meaning, you know, serving more children and family. This year we expanded from Dallas to also Fort Worth, and we have chapters in Waco, Austin, San Antonio, Rio Grande Valley, Houston, of course, El Paso. I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Those foundations in Fort Worth, if you're in Dallas, they always want you to be in Fort Worth.
Oh,
so
yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. We have a big office in Dallas, and the Fort Worth Foundations really want us to be over there. Chris Bell, who's works here at UHD and is on the school board over at Spring, wants to know, this year both AVANCE and UHD are celebrating the 40th anniversary. Where does AVANCE see themselves at 50?
That's a great question.
Is there going to be a midlife crisis there, Rick?
Sure. No, I think I think that our 40th celebration we just had several weeks ago. And part of that was really to explore this question: what's in store for the next 40 years? And I think, generally speaking, when AVANCE began as a 2-generation intervention, it was extremely cutting edge on, the parents the first teacher, the home's the first classroom, and why that was critical. I think moving forward, our goal is to continue to be innovative, continue to serve more families and children, continue to be a voice at shaping national strategy, priorities, policy, so that more families and children, because the truth is that AVANCE isn't the panacea. There are organizations out there that are doing great work, doing a lot like we're doing, but AVANCE will never serve every child in the United States and every child that should have services, or the parents should have services. So that's where the collaboration piece comes in.
Liz Earhart wants to know, what's the most successful way to thank donors to AVANCE? What have you guys done that seems to work well for you guys?
Well, first I want to thank Chris for that last question, but the thing that works best, I think, is obviously the one-on-one appreciation. And I also think that based on what your mission is, it is best to put a face on it, to humanize it. I will tell you a story that I know of a friend that had been asking a large corporate person to be involved with their Special Olympics for a long, long time. And they were kind of hedging and whatnot. And they finally got that person who was the decision maker for this corporation to come out to a Special Olympics and put that person on the finish line of the race to be one of the huggers. You don't think he didn't give money after that? So you got to personalize it. You got to make it. You got to humanize it. You got to make it real for people. And I think through what it is you do, and obviously I think that the senior leadership as well and the board members have to be involved in thanking people. And I think that's important.
Danita Wiltz wants to know, how big is your board and how often are the board members replaced?
Danita, we currently we're at 15. We have 3 or 4 slots. The 15 are on a 3-year rotation. So, and so they overlap one another. And typically we have board members that stay on for 2 terms, 6 years. However, I will share this with you. Part of our strategic planning this year, and with our new board chair, and our new board chair is Olga Rodriguez.
Oh, wow.
With the Port of Houston.
Yeah.
Very dear friend, also from the East End, where part of our strategic planning was to survey our board members and ask them, why are you serving? What is it that you expect this organization to do, or what do you see it doing? And how can you, so it was a fairly in-depth, soul searching of why people are involved with us. And then also to be able to inventory what kind of skill sets and what kind of folks we need on our board to, again, fit in with our larger strategic plan. So even at that level, there's work to do.
Elizabeth Iparea wants to know, if we were to ask some of the people at AVANCE what kind of leader you are, let's say in 3 words to make it brief, what would they say, Rick?
Intense, passionate, and good-natured.
Well, those are pretty great things, aren't they? Yeah. Corey McKay here wants to know, what extent, what sort of role do volunteers play for AVANCE?
We have, at the grassroots level, everything from reading to children to being involved in different festivals like Dia de los Niños, in different activities like that. We have gotten with, as well, AARP and other organizations that will volunteer to give us some additional support, whether it's at the administrative level or just doing things that, that just help us out. So I think, pretty much at every level, we've had professionals, paraprofessionals. Sometimes we'll have a company specifically that will come in when we have a project to do, inputting. That's their corporate contribution for volunteer hours, and then festivals. So just, I think, pretty much at every level.
Aruna Davies has almost a controversial question, Rick, and this is something we've talked about on our radio show on Pacifica a number of times. The debate around parents spanking. It's a big one in Texas right now, especially with the football players and Adrian Peterson. The evidence, we like evidence. The evidence is clear that probably we should be moving away from spanking, but we live in this culture in Texas where it's a part of our culture. Where do you stand on there? What does AVANCE say about this?
Well, I think, like you say, the evidence is pretty clear, and I would also submit that there probably isn't anybody listening or in this room that hadn't been spanked. Right. I mean, we grew up in a culture of, save the rod, spoil the child, all that kind of stuff. And I think, though, I would like to say, we clearly don't endorse, which is however you want to do it is in and of itself is a violent act. Yeah. Even if, and I can remember giving my sons swats, sometimes responsive, and I regretfully say perhaps spanking them in the moment in a heat of emotion, or even when going out of the room and discussing with the mother and actually having a paddle and going back in there and giving a couple of swats. Which and in all those, I know my boys are going to wind up reminding me of it at some point in time, right? And I just think that it would be, in an ideal world, it would be great if we could, in irrational moments, be more rational and not perpetuate what is a physical violent act. But I think that it's just something we all have to individually work on and work on as a society.
It's interesting that if you lead with "you shouldn't spank," people don't listen to you anymore, do they? Yeah. So it's important because it's so important to our culture, and I do believe over time, if parents are taught early enough, timeout and other things. Yeah. But you can't start when kids are teenagers.
Yeah, and in the young parents we deal with, and the hard to reach families we deal with, they parent the way they were parented, and it's a very difficult cycle to break. And it takes a lot more work to not make you do something because I'm going to physically make you not do it. And so the alternative is a lot more work. And oftentimes in our rushed, hectic, chaotic, stressful world, we will lean to what we learned and know versus what we probably should do or know better. So it's a difficult.
It is. Brittany Kilgore has a nice question. When you're mingling with other leaders, is there a particular question you like to ask people about leadership?
I think for me, it's I want to know about the organization and how it performs when you're not there, not how it performs when you're there. I think that what your intent and vision and the climate of work environment. So I have to travel quite a bit, and I've got a great COO, Jesse Herrera, who is a principal here at one of the high schools, and you can go and do what I need to do at the strategic level, knowing full well that everything's in order, and bills are paid on time, and folks are coming to work, and folks are performing. And so I want to know from folks is, not how does an organization run when you're there, because everybody's going to snap to and come in at the right time and all those kinds of things. How does it perform when you're not there?
It's interesting what great managers' principals can be too. Isn't that right? Like Jesse. Jason Covington has a good question. You know, Rick, you've done, you know, the Dream Act, and you've done so many significant things. What do you want your ultimate legacy to be, do you think?
I think in this particular social space, I think it's critical that early childhood education is just a core tenet of this nation. You know, it's one of the legs of the stool of you know, Maslow's hierarchy of need in this nation. You got to have water, you got to have food, a roof over your head, you got to have early childhood education. And the reason is kind of what I alluded to at the front end. For us to maintain our greatness as a nation, for us to continue to you know, be even greater, we have to have a total national awareness of why this social space is so critical. And that's not just me saying that. That's China saying it. That's India saying it. That's Israel saying it. That's, you know, European nations saying it. You know, and actually, I don't, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think kindergarten is still compulsory in Texas. It is not compulsory in Texas that your kid goes to kindergarten. And so if the attitude, and let me tell you what, corporate America gets it, the business community gets it, educators get it, advocates get it, everybody gets it. The folks that don't get it is our neighbors. And Bubba, I came out okay and I didn't have any of that preschool stuff. Well, maybe that may have been okay for you, but that's not where this world is headed, you know, and where we need to be to continue to be great as a nation.
There's so many things I want to talk to you about. Two final questions. Will your name ever be on a ballot again, Rick?
I really doubt it.
You doubt it?
I think I've had my 15 minutes, and I love what I'm doing, working with families and children, and really trying to be involved in what I, again, believe is the decisive policy area for us as a nation. You know, we'll continue to be involved, support folks, and you know, if I'm ever asked to do to lead some kind of effort in a task force or in some kind of way, love to do those kinds of things.
If Hillary Clinton is president and she says, "Hey, could you come be Undersecretary of the Army or something?" Would you do that?
I've probably had too many gaffes at this time that I probably couldn't get through the vetting process. I served in this administration, asked me to serve on a board that was called the Military Leadership Diversity Commission, which looked at why the bench of all the general officers and admirals, why there were so few people of color and women. Minuscule number of thousands of these, you know, admirals. And why and what recommendations we could do to help shape that. Going through that vetting process anymore, I think it's very, 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 very difficult for good people to serve. It is so, I mean, I think in fact I was probably looked at more harder than my oppositional research was in a Senate campaign.
Wow.
And so then what that means is that you have a lot of good people, especially these kids need to understand with all this social media stuff. I mean, once you hit send, it's gone forever. I had a really good friend, Representative Moody out of El Paso. Well, he was in a fraternity when he was 25, 26 years old. Now, mind you, this is about 6 years ago then. So these kids that are out there now, and they're just so, I think it's just, and it may be where folks just overlook all that. Oh, well, that was just, you know, knuckleheadedness when you were young.
Youthful indiscretion, yeah.
Yeah, but I tell you anymore, it just becomes much, much more difficult.
So your final question, and this is a question we ask all our leaders here, a big, huge softball question. So you've been around the state, but in Houston or around the state, favorite restaurant, favorite place to go eat?
Favorite restaurant, I would say, and this is just recent because I took my mother there for her birthday last month. I really like taking her to Brennan's. It's
that's a nice
really
place,
special. Yeah. You know, it's a you know, New Orleans, Louisiana flair, super white tablecloth thing, great service, great food, and love spoiling my mother over there for her birthday. So.
My mom lives out of town. I took her there. She still talks about the big pile of pralines that she took with her.
Bananas Foster, pralines, and yeah, everything there is really good.
When they make the Hollywood movie, the Rick Noriega story, who's going to play you, Rick?
You know, I forgot I was going to ask some people that. It would have to be somebody without hair, huh? Or I guess they could put them in makeup.
They could put them in makeup, yeah.
You know, I hadn't really thought about that. I don't know who it would be.
Because in The West Wing, it was Jimmy Smits who sort of played
Jimmy
you.
Smits, yeah. And, you know, I will tell you, I would like for that to be done by El Rey Productions, which is run by Robert Rodriguez, which now is a incubator for cultivating Latino writers behind the camera, in front of the camera, where, you know, both, you know, African American and Latinos, there's so few in either of those capacities. A lot on
He
TV.
did it at Mariachi. It's owned by Univision as the investor in that.
The Spy Kids and a whole bunch of other
interesting stuff.
But so they have it on that. So I think that actor, we probably don't know that actor yet.
Yeah, maybe
that's a cop out.
You know, maybe Antonio Banderas. You know, but
he's a little short. But
Rick Noriega,
I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you
Bob.
so much,
I
man,
really
for being here.
And
thanks
thank
for
you.
all you're
This
doing.
is a huge honor for me to be with y'all, these, you know, young leaders and young minds, and doing great things. Y'all are going to change the world. So
well, they
to be a
appreciate
part
you
of this,
being
I
here
appreciate
as well.
it a lot.
And I do too. Hey, we will see you guys next time here at the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Until then, keep up the good work. We'll see you next week.